Okay, so this is kind of a representation of what was discussed in class. Our bodies kind of act as the center for ourselves, and so one of the things that we told students was that wherever you are, you're kind of looking at the world around you, and things are always going to be relative to you. One thought is that our bodies kind of position for us what's in front of us, what's to the right, the left, behind us, what's above us, what's beneath us. And so each of those kind of forms cardinal points that are related to our self facing forward. And that self facing forward is in some ways related to this idea of a point in space. Now, a point in space, right, has essentially three physical directions. It's got the x direction, it has the y direction, and it has the z direction. When we're walking around the face of the planet, the z direction is assumed to be on the surface of the Earth or really, really close to it. But the x and y direction are considered to be, found on the surface of the Earth by latitude and longitude. So one additional sort of dimension that is sometimes considered as the notion of time, as maybe the fourth dimension, right? And so we are all progressing through time during our lives, and so in addition to being in a particular place physically, we are also conceptually in a different place in time every moment of our lives. From the idea of a point, we look at how points and lines are used as the essential elements of architecture. So a point can be used to define an area or a space, okay? So if I put a point down somewhere, right, and I put 5 chairs around it, and I sit 5 people in those chairs, they're all defining this space in the middle, and they're all facing to each other, okay? So that's kind of these two pieces right here. If we create 2 of those circles, right, and we put a line between them, then the 2 circles, right, are creating a space, but they're also defining a sight line that exists from the center to center of each of those spaces. A different way that lines are used, okay, in this fashion is through the idea of using the line as an organizing element. And so in this particular case, we see a line which has a starting point here and an ending point here, or 2 points within which it spans. And that line is being used to organize a variety of different elements. Okay, all of them are on the line. The elements can be either on the line or they can be to either side of a line. All right, and one of the things that's important to note is that the things can be symmetrical around that line, or they can be asymmetrical. So for example, we could have had this thing mirrored onto this side and it would be exactly the same, but it can also be that we have something very different on this side than is on that side. Okay, and so like for example, I could erase all of this and say I'm going to put one large block here. That is still, all of these items are being arranged by that line. Okay. Other elements that come to mind is the idea of 2 points and the axes upon which they're located having at their midpoint exactly 1 halfway and 1 halfway, right, what is considered to be a perpendicular cross axes. So the angle is going to be at opposite, is going to be at 90 degrees to the axis that's created. So here we have 2 points defining something, the axis line between them that is being used to organize the points, and then a cross axis that's halfway across, okay, and is perpendicular to that. So an example of that could be 2 columns with a beam over top of it. So there's a cross axis that locates the columns and a midpoint for it, and then, there's an axis that locates the columns, and then there's a cross axis halfway between the 2 columns that defines how somebody might walk through those things and out. Okay, so with this information and maybe a couple of additional slides, so I'm going to sort of shift this over to the screen for a moment. All right, and and let me find some of the slides that we sort of took a look at. We used an aerial view of Barcelona, and in the aerial view of Barcelona, let me pull this over to the other screen. Okay, full screen that. In the aerial view of Barcelona, you can see a whole series of roads, right, that are converging on a point. And the point can either be a void or it can be an object. Okay, so that was one of the images that we took a look at in class. In addition to that, let's see, we looked at a couple of additional ones. Here's one of Paris. Here's the Triumphal Arch in Paris, and you can see all of the lines of axes that are sort of emanating or converging upon the Triumphal Arch. And finally, well, no, not finally, let's look at Washington, D.C. I'm trying to find it. I don't know where it is. There's Washington, D.C. right there. And so this is not a very good image, but here we see the Capitol building, right, and the Capitol Mall, the Washington Monument, I believe the World War II Memorial, and the Lincoln Memorial. And you see this axial arrangement that's being created from it, and you see quite a number of additional streets and stuff that are creating key points within the city, right, that have meaning or importance to our American culture. One of the key things that I talked about that I find is one of the most beautiful places that I've encountered in Washington is not visible in this photograph. It's located about right in here, and that is the Vietnam War Memorial. The Vietnam War Memorial has two axes, one of which points directly at the Lincoln Memorial, and the other axis points at the Washington Memorial. I think what I'll do is see if I can find, I'm going to try to find a Google Maps that might be able to show that. See if it finds it. Did it find it? There's the Lincoln Memorial, so it's going to be right in here. So let's switch to a Google Earth view and see if we can't see it. And there it is right there. So one of these axis lines of the Vietnam War Memorial points directly at the Lincoln Memorial. So when you're walking along it, you see the Lincoln Memorial in front of you, but it's also reflected on the black wall of the memorial. And then the other line points over at the Washington Monument, which again, as you walk up this, you see it in front of you, and you also see it as a reflection in the wall of the memorial. Okay, and so that is an example of using axis lines in an architectural construction. So I think that kind of covers everything that we talked about in class. So I'm going to save that video.